Hey, friends, I'm excited today. I'm excited because I have a special guest here on the podcast and on the show by the name of Ryan Mastan. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ryan. Number one, he is a rock star in the industry. He has a pedigree and a history that he knows what he's talking about. I was actually at the Exit Planning Institute talking on stage, and in the Exit Planning Institute, there's a mix of advisors, CPAs, attorneys, you name it, that I had the honor and privilege to talk with. And when I met Ryan, I wanted to have him on the show because of his expertise around growing business value, especially around quality of earnings. And so I think we're going to have a fun conversation. What I want you as a business owner to glean from this conversation is you can begin today preparing for your ideal exit. Now, the ideal exit may not take place tomorrow. That's not the goal of exit planning. It is to make sure that your business is investable. It is to make sure that if you are working with a venture capital firm, PE firm, an internal employee, et cetera, that somebody can actually buy your business. And so with that being said, Ryan, how are you, sir?
Austin, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. A little bit about myself. I'm a partner at EHGC here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Do a lot of work with business owners and helping them kind of establish that value before they are even thinking about selling.
Yeah, so let's talk through that. So Ryan, whenever you're working with a business owner, one of the things that you and I spoke about was quality of earnings. And I'm starting to see more and more of that from the seller's perspective versus the buyer's perspective, as I saw 20 years ago. And I know quality of earnings is one of those things that you dive into in nauseam and in detail. So maybe answer this question first. What is quality of earnings? What does that phrase mean?
So quality of earnings is much different than your typical audit product that you might see from an accountant, right? So, our goal is to give the investment bankers who are selling the company a good EBITDA number, adjusted EBITDA number to go to market with. So instead of just taking your company to market without doing any pre-work, we are actually in there beforehand, looking for any issues, looking for any adjustments to EBITDA, to be able to present that number to buyers that everyone can kind of come with a good offer, right? It basically creates competition in the market and kind of puts more in your court, right? I mean, you're kind of in control now. So
okay. So whenever you're talking about quality of earnings, you're taking basically their income statement, as some small business owners refer to it as, profit and loss statements, and I think I heard you're normalizing, which, what does that mean in your terms when you say normalization?
So there's a lot of you look through a company and you look through their trial balances or their accounts, and we can kind of quickly identify some issues that might be there that might be considered to be non-recurring, right? So for example, if you have some consultants that you've used that you're not going to use in the future, we can add that back to EBITDA, right? If you have a lawsuit that is non-recurring, we can add that back to EBITDA. So there's a variety of different things that we look at from a non-recurring basis. And then kind of just from the basic accounting standpoint, we're looking at that balance sheet to make sure that everything is recorded appropriately for both working capital and EBITDA. Because if your balance sheet's not right, there's an issue going on with your P&L and then also your working capital as well. So
you're double checking the math on the balance sheet, the income statement, the entire accounting paperwork to begin with. Then you're going in and trying to figure out what expenses are non-reoccurring. You mentioned lawyers, you mentioned lawsuits, consultants. What are some other areas that are often common, if there's such a thing as that, common add backs that you might focus on whenever you're dealing the quality of earnings report?
One example would be, family personal expenses. You see all the time where an owner might be, expensing personal items, items for their kids. I've even seen kids on the payroll that aren't even actually involved with the company. So, those are kind of things that we add back. Other things that we look at as well is kind of, customer concentration. Are there any customers that you've lost during the historical period that are not easily replaceable, right? So, typically what we see is that, you're going to lose customers, you're going to gain customers, right? It's all going to kind of even out in the end. But there are situations that you see where they've lost such a big customer that it's almost going to be impossible for them to replace that, in the near future. So we may potentially decrease EBITDA for the margin effect of that customer, right? I don't see that often, but it is something that we look for, customer concentration and making sure that we're taking that into consideration.
Whenever you're doing the quality of earnings and getting the clients ready to go to market, I'm sure that you've seen like the doomsday or the horror stories, like, hey, don't do this. Are there any you want to sit on top of a soapbox, Ryan, like scream at the top of your lungs, business owners, don't do this? What is this that you've seen? It's like, oh, I can't believe they did this. What would be something that you're just like, man, don't do it?
You kind of talked about, adding value to a company, right? And there's a lot of business owners who have had a nice company for 40 or 50 years, and they really haven't focused on adding value, and they haven't focused on, their financial operations. I mean, I've seen so many businesses where they can't even really tell you. They think they know it in their head what their customer and product profitability is, but it's not on paper, right? So, the whole point of due diligence during the sale process is being able to prove your value, right? You can have the value, but if you can't prove it, that doesn't mean much to buyers. And, that's one of the things that we do with our quality of earnings is we're there to basically make them diligence proof, right? We have the support for our adjustments to EBITDA. We're saying, hey, here's where it's recorded on the financial statements. Here's invoices to support that number. It's a good number. To go back to your question, I think just maybe, focusing on financial operations and making sure that everything's in order and you can answer those questions that are going to be asked to you when you exit your business. And, I'm sure you'll agree. I always tell people exit planning should start on day one of operations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's pretend we're talking to a client. You and I, we're talking to a business owner. I'm there and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to drive your value. You're there. You're trying to drive the value. We're approaching it from perhaps two different areas. You're looking at it from the accounting lens. I'm looking at it from the business consultant lens, saying, hey, here's how value acceleration methodology works. Whenever we're having this conversation with the owner, they're ultimately trying to figure out what the business is worth, right? And they have this idea because, cousin Eddie down the street who drives the Winnebago and likes to dump the sewer out in the street in the sidewalk, he sold his business for this particular multiple or this particular discounted cash flow methodology, which type of appraisal we're doing. So you're getting ready to do quality of earnings. I'm trying to figure out how the value is going to actually appraise out at. What might you tell a business owner who is sitting here contemplating whether or not now's the time to sell, whether or not now's the time to even perhaps increase value in their company? Is it even possible? You mentioned somebody's been in business 30, 40, 50 years. Is it even possible to increase value? And what could a skilled accountant like yourself who focuses on these things, what do you bring to the table that they're just missing out on?
I think a good way to answer this question is if you look at these reports that are put out in the market from investment bankers, you might see something called a pro forma adjustment, right? So they might say, hey, if I would have increased sales, this is what my numbers would have looked like. If I would have switched suppliers, this is what my numbers would have looked like, right? A variety of different things. Are they going to get some value for that? Maybe they'll get some, but they're not going to get full value. So what I always tell the business owners is, why would you give that value to an acquirer? Get it yourself, right? 3 to 4 or 5 years before, look at all your customer bases. Is there opportunity to raise prices? Can I do some switching around of suppliers and still get the quality but save some money? Just looking at all of your cost of goods sold and your operating expenses, looking for that opportunity. Because if you do that 3 to 5 years before I do my work, the value is there, right? And you're going to get paid off of that value. I always say, why should a buyer have to pay for your past sins, right? I mean, you didn't do these things and now you want me to pay you for them. So that's one thing I always say is, look at your business holistically, make those improvements 3 to 5 years before you sell to be able to get that value yourself versus passing that off to somebody else.
Your business has become a source of stress and frustration because you are working harder than ever before, but your growth has flatlined. That's because what got you here won't take you where you want to be. You see, there are thousands of books and coaches promising solutions for growing your business, but none of them address the root issues that are keeping you shackled by your business while halting its growth. Value Growth Academy is the key you've been looking for. It offers actionable strategies to eliminating your stress and frustration while maximizing your business's value. Increase your income, free up your time, and finally enjoy life. Don't wait. Your opportunity to transform your business and life is here. Visit justingoodbread.com/academy and apply today. That's interesting. And I know you've been in business a while, so you probably have war stories. Like we could probably share those till midnight tonight. But what's an example of a business owner who perhaps wasn't ready, or they didn't do exactly what you just said? They didn't go in and start trying to unlock that value beforehand. And now you're dealing with Q of E, quality of earnings, and Give me a war story, man. Tell me something from the trenches that'll get me excited, or tell the audience, like, dude, you got to work on this now. You got to work on value acceleration now. Don't wait. I'd love to hear one of your war stories.
Sure, absolutely. So I can think of one. I mean, like you said, I probably have hundreds of them, but one more recent one. We're working on a manufacturer, really, really nice company. But operationally and financially, it just wasn't there. Guy's wife did the books for him. Really, no outside accountant help. Couldn't tell you what customer margins are. Couldn't tell you what product profitability was. No actual customer contracts. It was just all kind of like, hey, we're going to do the work for you, and that's it, right? They did not count their inventory, so there was never the number on the balance sheet for inventory was like the same since the beginning of time, right? They just never counted it. Everything went through cost of goods sold. So, we kind of went in there, not as early as I would have liked, but basically said, okay, we're starting this process. You probably have at least 5 to 6 to 7 months until closing happens. So every month then we're going to do an inventory observation. So we can tell the buyer, this is what our inventory is, right? And we're going to look at your inventory, and we're going to look and see if there's anything super old sitting out there, right? That we need to potentially reserve for or write off. And we're going to clean up your balance sheet and your P&L, and we're going to be able to tell these guys when they ask what my profitability is, who are my top customers, and so forth, right? So if you go to market without doing that work, you're going to have a hell of a time selling your business, and your life is going to be absolutely miserable because you haven't had that pre-work done. So that's kind of what we do, right? We help them prepare. We help them know what questions are going to be asked and how to prepare for that. And I always like to say time kills deals, right? Yep. So if you're a private equity group or a strategic company and you're going to acquire a company and it takes somebody a month to get back to you on something, you'll lose interest pretty quickly. So
now in that horror story, that war story, let's call it, how much do you reckon they left on the table? I think you saw my fingers, like 7 different things you just rattled off the top of your head. And I bet if I gave you another hour, you could come up with probably another dozen or 2 things they could have done. How much money do you reckon they left on the table that if they had just done the basics, as you and I would say basics, that they would have probably captured?
Let's say for this one, I'm guessing it was probably 5 to 9, right? And they're probably getting 5. Implementing those procedures as far as being able to prove your value, you're going to get closer to that 9 versus the 5, right? You got a nice company. We did enough work to get comfortable that it's a good company, but there's still a lot of risk here. So you're going to get closer to that 5, right? Versus that 9. And like you said before, we call it the country club valuation, right? Like the guys at the country club said, oh, I got 9 times EBITDA. Why am I only getting 5? Well, this guy could leave tomorrow and his business is going to run the same, and he's got a great management team and great culture in place. This guy over here is the sole guy, right? He's got all the customer relationships, all the supplier relationships, and he's got 90% customer concentration, right? So it's gonna severely affect your multiples.
So I'm going to change gears here slightly. From your experience, whenever somebody's looking at growing value in their company and they're saying, "Hey," actually, I heard this today from Dan Martell. He was on a show that I was watching early this morning. I like to watch YouTube as like a group of people, just see what people are saying. And Dan Martell was interviewing somebody, and I think it might have been Cody Sanchez, but they made the statement that most business owners don't really make their money until they sell. Right. Now, obviously, we make pretty decent income considering for those of us who can break through the glass ceilings. And once we do, we make pretty decent income compared to our W-2 counterparts. But in terms of wealth, we're so highly illiquid until we have that transaction event. So I guess where I'm leading up with that kind of a foundation is, from your experience, when should a business owner, no matter the stripe, no matter the flavor, no matter location, type of business, et cetera, when should they begin taking seriously this idea of sound financial accounting, sound value acceleration methodology for accounting, specifically in your niche? When should that take place? Can they wait till a year or 2 beforehand, or is that going to come back to bite them in the rear?
Come back to bite them. I mean, if you're truly in that value building mode, you always want to be able to show somebody what your customer margins are, and making sure that you're doing full accrual accounting on a monthly basis. It's kind of interesting because a lot of the companies that we look at, when we do these quality of earnings, we're doing the past 2 years plus the most recent trailing 12 months, right? You could have one company that maybe they clean stuff up at year end, and it can look like a completely different company for the trailing 12 months because they're not doing things consistently on a month-to-month basis. And that obviously affects your monthly margins and all that other good stuff. So, the earlier the better. Like I said before, really day one. Just focusing on building your management team and your culture and not being the sole guy there, right? Like I said, you should be able to leave for a vacation or disappear for 2 months, and your business should be able to run without you, right? And I mean, how many companies do you see where the owner leaves for 3 days and all hell breaks loose, right? You can't, everything kind of goes. So, like I said, adding value, you call it exit planning or whatever you want to call it, it's just good business strategy, right? So I always say, make sure you have, good accounting support, financial support to help you kind of set up that accounting and being able to prove your value whenever you need to. And Justin, you know this from the CEPA program, the 5Ds, right? You might not think you're going to sell for 10 years, but there might be something that comes up unexpectedly, death, divorce, disability, whatever it may be, that you may have to sell your business, and you want to be ready for those situations.
I'm dealing with one right now that it's a disagreement. It's one of the D's. It's a disagreement, and that's going to lead to a lawsuit between partners if they can't exit the business. And we were talking to them, and I'm like, hey, and we've been on value acceleration. We've doubled the business value in the last 3 years. So it's been, I often say, Ryan, and I know you probably see this through your professional lens. Many business owners don't believe us when we say this, but I can't guarantee it because you can't guarantee nothing in life is guaranteed except for death and taxes, right? But I can almost promise that if somebody can follow basic value acceleration methodology, if they can follow it, then they could just about double their enterprise value in 18 to 36 months. I've yet to see a company that hasn't been able to do that. Right. And this company is one of those. They've doubled their value, but now they're very lean and they're able to take vacations, and now they have disagreement. And I'm like, guys, you're going to blow all your hard work up for the last 3 years unless you can bring the disagreement. They can't. It's like, okay, well then can we put together a deal to sell the practice, sell the business? Y'all are going to have to work for probably a year or two, depending on what the earnout structure is going to be for this particular industry, but you're going to have X dollars in your pocket. Could you clean out the horse stall with a fondue fork if somebody paid you enough? And they're like, absolutely, right? So I've seen where value acceleration can help. I've also seen, in this particular case, quality of earnings, they hired an expert accounting firm to actually do their just their financials on a regular basis. They weren't audited, as you mentioned, but now the QE is ready to go, right? In fact, Gilby and I will be talking about that hopefully here very soon. So there's a lot of Q&E that has to deal with. So let me change gears slightly. Let's assume for this question that you're talking to a group of business owners from the stage, right? And one of the questions that is fielded from the audience is, so Ryan, man, you got this vast experience. You've been in the accounting world. Not only have you been in the accounting, you've been dealing with M&A for some time. You do the Q of E. You know what flies, what doesn't fly. You know how to bury skeletons. You don't know how to bury skeletons. You kind of see this. What is the top 3 things that me as a business owner that I have to do today in my business in order to prepare for the ultimate sale?
Kind of like I said before, making yourself diligence proof, right? Making sure that you do have customer contracts and you have those stashed away in a folder on your computer, or even a summary of those customer terms. Same thing with vendors and supplier. Make sure those agreements are all available. Making sure that you can prove your value, right? And like we said before, I think one of the easiest way to add quick value to your company is to try to decentralize yourself from the company, right? Trust your management team, make sure that there's people in place to take over your role when you do leave the business. That's going to go a long way of adding value to your company, right? Justin, I mean, depending on the buyer, a sole business owner who has all the relationships, that could be looked at as a negative, right? And the business owner might think, oh, this is great. I'm the guy. I've got everything in my head. But then a buyer comes in and they're like, well, what happens when you leave and we don't have this institutional knowledge that's in your head, right? And are we going to be able to step in and take those customer relationships, or is it more of a personal type relationship between you and that customer, right? So it's all about preparation, documentation. I think I said earlier, time kills deals. So, The quicker that you can provide a buyer with information, the better. And it's such a simple thing to do. And, we have a pretty robust request list when we do our work. So say 50 items. And if you got your stuff in order, you should be able to provide that all to us within a day.
Yep.
And you wouldn't be surprised how many times it's 2.5 months down the road and we're still waiting on stuff.
Absolutely. And I think what you just unpacked, I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the show before, and we've done some 500 odd episodes, but one of the things that led to my high valuation for my practice when I exited, I think you knew this. I started a practice in the financial services business in 2017. Then 48 months later, had a 8-figure exit, right? And one of the reasons for that 8-figure exit is exactly what you said. Whenever they asked for my accounting stuff, I'd already done quality of earnings. I had already put everything together. I wasn't even trying to sell. My wife had gotten sick, and we were dealing with hospital things, Ryan. And so we decided to move, right? Decided to make some changes in our life for our family's values and our family's benefit. And by being able to return exactly everything they needed electronically with less than 4 hours after request, that jacked my value up. And they actually added more points on the multiple because of that, one of those moves, right? So I think you're unlocking a lot here. As we bring this thing to a close, right? As we bring this podcast to a close, we've talked about quality of earnings. We talked about valuation. We spoke a little bit about, how value acceleration or purposely driving the value of a company up before, you're involved. We talked about horror stories and good stories. What is one thing that's like, dude, Justin, your audience really needs to know this? What is that one thing, or have we already hit that and throughout our ramblings here?
Making sure that you can fully describe your business to the investment bankers and to the owners. I always tell people, hiring an investment banker is a great investment. It's not cheap. And when you see that engagement letter, it might be a little bit, disheartening, but it's worth it, right? They have the relationships. They know who to approach, for potential acquirers. And, it takes a lot of stress off of the business owner, right? If you're a business owner and you try to sell your business on your own with no advisor, you're going to have a heck of a time, right? It's going to be extremely stressful, and it's going to take away from your ability to run your business, right? So you could do that, and your business suffers and your business declines because you're spending all this time on diligence, and then you're asked for a retrade. You're like, well, hey, my business has declined, so we're going to lower our purchase price, right? Instead of hiring the right advisors, letting them kind of take care of all of that stuff with your input. Like I said, creating that competition in the market, for your business. You want to take an A asset to the market through this whole value acceleration process, and using the right advisors to help you market in that way.
So my guest today has been Ryan Mastan, and he is the quality of earnings expert, the guru, if you will, one of our fellow certified exit planning advisors in the SEPA community. Ryan, thank you so much, man, for joining us on the show today. I think the information you shared was invaluable.
Thank you, Justin, for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, friends. So you've heard it again, not from me, but you heard so much again from Ryan here about how important it is to begin value acceleration as fast as possible. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. You've got to decentralize yourself as the owner from the business. Ryan said that again today. You've heard me say, hire a razor sharp accountant, hire somebody who can make sure your books are in order. You heard that today. There's so much that you've heard me say over the last 500 some odd episodes. Friends, what you've heard today from even a third party, somebody who's an expert in their field, is what led me to my 8-figure exit. It's what led me to several of my 6- and 7-figure exits. It's really easy to build wealth really fast if you know the game plan, if you know the rule book. And so Ryan today was able to share that with us. So friends, I know life gets complicated sometimes, and I realize talking about accounting, I realize it can get boring. You want to stick a fork in your eye, move to Idaho and sell llamas. I get it, but you can't gloss over this. This is important information that you as a business owner, you've got to know. You've got to know how to drive these things. And so until next time, friends, y'all go out and make it a great day.